first yourself, please introduce yourselves. So it's just a little bit of context. We're going to talk about the Metaverse. Do you know what the Metaverse is about? You read about it. It's everywhere, right? Everyone hears about the Metaverse, but no one knows what exactly is the Metaverse, except in them. Many like them who are actually, creating it. So, Richard, could you please, briefly say who you are, and we'll go around.
Thanks. Pleasure to meet you all. I'm Richard Benson. I'm a design creative director at Accenture. I spent 30 years working actually from physical design, so I'm an interior architecture and a product designer, into digital worlds. And I basically have the great pleasure to look after amazing designers that work in this area at the moment.
Hello, everyone. Most importantly, I'm an alumni of ESA in Barcelona, where I was from 2001 to 2003. I've had the privilege since then of being in a number of tech companies, including being one of the early team at Skype and then Spotify, and most recently IPO'd a company called Go Compare on the London Stock Exchange. And 3 years ago, there was an opportunity to buy one of the UK's very first tech unicorns, a company called Blippar, out of administration. And so for the last 3 years, I've been turning around Blippar, which is a augmented reality content creation platform.
Awesome.
Great. Hi everyone, so I'm Mimi. I'm co-founder and COO at Hadean. We're creating technology to power the metaverse. And we do that using a platform we've built for distributed computing. And that really just means programming more than one machine at the same time, which if you think when you write a program, you write it on a laptop, that's a limited amount of computing power. These metaverse applications are very big, very complex, globally distributed. So you need to be able to program many thousands of machines for whatever purpose. And that's
awesome. So it's going to be a great conversation. So Mimi will share her insight from the convergence technology point of view. Faisal is going to own the territory of the creators' economy. So he's on a mission to democratize augmented reality and extended reality for everyone. And Richard, I think, is the person who is going to help us understand much better what is the metaverse and why do we need it?
That's a really good question, and one that's been defined by many people all the time, and it's always evolving, and I'd be really interested to hear how you see this. But we look at it very much as a group of creatives around the potential of it. Effectively it is the internet, the evolution of the internet. But with that evolution, we're going beyond the ability just to browse. And what's really interesting about it is we're now looking at effectively how we're cohabitating or participating in what's really very important is that this is an experience that is persistent. So experiences that don't go away when you close down your browser. And that really goes the whole spectrum from the real world to the virtual world and everything in between. So that looks at augmented reality, mixed media, and obviously virtual reality that gets all the headlines quite often.
And then having worked for so many years in creating amazing physical spaces that people feel they belong to, what do you think is one of perhaps the greatest challenges in building these amazing virtual experiences?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I come from the physical world. We're all humans. I mean, I think when you look at digital design per se, at everything, it's remembering it's human first. I always say that any great experience, and it's bannered around a lot, experience design, starts with great stories. How do we tell stories as humans? How do we relate to them? So I think the challenge is to maintain that integrity of storytelling, to make sure that there's a lot of fads, there's a lot of gimmicks, there's a lot of interest. But particularly when we talk about the creative and economy of the creatives, the democracy of it is so important. With any great technological advancements, it's open to everybody to bring their own ideas to that. But I think maintaining that storytelling and the quality of that and the design that we bring into it is probably the biggest challenge.
And who do you think are we? So Faisal, so 10 years ago, Blippar was in the market, creating the first augmented reality experiences ever. not ever, but commercially viable, right? Now is your moment of glory, isn't it? Could you tell us, so how do you see the metaverse, and what is it that you are doing to empower creators to be part of it, and why?
I think we're a long way actually from our moment of glory. I think we're just at the start of what will be a very long transition, where if you think about the smartphone that everybody has today, the first iPhone came out in 2007, so it's 15 years old. So when I look at the trajectory that we're on, we're at least 15 years from something that is recognizable as a metaverse, but I still think we've got a long way to defining what that metaverse is. You've got a lot of interested parties who are trying to claim and tell you what they think the metaverse is. Everyone from Mark Zuckerberg, who changed the name of his company to Meta, to Web3 companies. I don't think there is yet one generally accepted concept of what the metaverse is, and I actually call where we are today a bunch of isolated mini-verses. So you have companies like Roblox and Fortnite and Snap and Facebook or Meta creating isolated mini-verses which are more like games. But for me, metaverse has to be a connected world where all of those isolated silos allow someone to transverse across all of them.
For sure, so interoperability and being able to take your things and being who you are in one space to another is very important, right?
Absolutely. So we see the world in exactly the same way. I think in order for this grand idea of an ideal metaverse to exist, we're going to need to solve the problems of interoperability. We're going to have to solve the problems of security, making sure that when you access something, you're doing it in a secure way, you are who you say you are. And scale, actually, as well. So they are limited experiences. The Travis Scott concert got a lot of hype, but you're standing in a room with 100 people. It's not quite the same as being in a stadium or going to Glastonbury. So these are the kind of technology problems that we are working on today. I think what will be the kind of success of that metaverse world that will come into fruition in the next 10 to 15 years will rely on the creator economy. And you've got to give the creators kind of metaverse as a service type technology stack to create things that we can't even imagine today.
So, and from your point of view, convergence is very important. So being able to integrate multiple technologies, well, let's step back a little bit. What are the tools we need to be able to, well, first, what are the traits that define the metaverse? Is it presence? Is it life experiences? What is it that defines those experiences? Or is it just immersiveness?
It's evolving. I mean, if I look at our roster of 180 designers that we have, all working in some aspect of the metaverse, it goes right across the board. From strategists really looking at, what are the principles, what are the experiences we're trying to create. Anthropologists, we have design research is a huge element of this, how we use the metaverse actually. It's one of the use cases we do a lot with work. Then obviously you tip into, we have a lot of traditional architects, interior designers that have moved into 3D. You have gamers, you have people that have been developing these major stories and bringing it together. So really from a design point of view, it goes across every area. But I think, I think this is a wonderful thing about design and the industry I've been in, that you evolve. You evolve with the technology, you evolve with the consumer's needs. But bringing in those skills from left of field, like I say, most of our team now are coming from a gaming background because they understand the code, they understand how to build this, but they also understand the storytelling, as I said before.
And what are the tools that they need to use to build those experiences and wonderful places?
Hopefully Blip Builder.
Hopefully Blippar. No, but seriously, if I was a brand and I wanted to create something, where do I go and look for talent?
It's a great question. I think I agree the gaming world has a lot of these pieces already, but what we're seeing in the move from sort of Web 2 to Web 3 is a shift in the kind of skills that you need to support it. So when I talk about Web3, I'm not just talking about blockchain and crypto. That's obviously an element of it, and these are emerging technologies. But if you think about the application space, interaction is moving outside the device. And it's happening today. You can sort of gesture to change a song in your phone. You can wink at a computer. You can talk to Siri. That's only going to become more and more ubiquitous. So you need the skills and the modular pieces of code, because that's another promise of Web3, right, is open architectures and modularity. Things aren't caught in silos, they work together. So unfortunately, distributed computing is going to be the paradigm that's necessary, because you can't do things all on single machines. You're going to need computation at the edge, which is basically like the devices in your hand. You're going to need application developers, so people who are able to program not just for the web or for mobile, but for these unique new experiences that I was talking about, gestures and talking and winking, or whatever that might mean. And then everything in between. How do you design the narrative and the storytelling to keep these worlds totally immersive, that bring through digital assets and port them between worlds but keep them meaningful? How do you design a training experience? And actually, it's also a meaningful training experience.
Okay, wonderful. And who are we building all this for? What do you think? So we've heard about what is it, why it could be possible, what's the talent, who are we building all this for, and do we need it?
The way I look at that is we have to understand a little bit of what type of metaverse we want to build. Because at the moment there seems to be two competing theories of what the metaverse is. One looks and feels more like a game.
Yeah.
And one form of internet is actually augmenting and putting digital content on the world around us to entertain or inform us, but actually in the world around us, as opposed to some kind of virtual world. The type of metaverse that I'm interested in, and I'm building platforms to allow creators to build on, makes this environment, the human interaction, the way that we interact with each other, the environment, whether you go shopping in the high street or whether you're watching Formula E cars, providing information and entertainment on top of that to make it a better experience, as opposed to a virtual experience, because people have been gaming for many, many years, and that type of metaverse, to me, just seems like gaming on steroids.
So, sorry.
I was going to say, I think people have this misconception that the intention of people building metaverse technologies is to put you all in a virtual world and stay there and forget about real life. And I think that's just, well, it's not true at all in the way that we see the world. I think having the ability to create a high fidelity, highly complex, meaningful virtual world that can help us make better decisions in the physical world is actually where the real use cases are going to come from. Until like the enterprise adoption of the metaverse, what we call a virtual 3D gaming environment, is effectively a synthetic training environment in a government or defense space, or a digital twin of a factory, or even an abstract process, which isn't a 3D world, but still a large computational challenge to virtually represent.
Richard, and how do you see what brands are asking you to do?
I mean, name a brand at the moment that isn't, largely down to Mr. Zuckerberg renaming his company, asking to come and talk to us about, we need to know about the metaverse. I think it's really interesting though, because I think you're right, gaming in many ways has been the birthplace of it, but unfortunately it's starting to hold people back from it. It's trivializing it. Well, actually, no. Look at Roblox, look at what happened during the pandemic and how communities spurred out of games. It went far beyond just the game platform. But our clients really, really go, from fashion brands right the way through to resource companies, looking at how we can use the metaverse to help them be more efficient, be more sustainable. An awful lot around training and education. I mean, Accenture itself, during the pandemic, Julie Sweet, our CEO, announced that she wanted to onboard a rather large number of people during the pandemic that couldn't do it in person. And we onboarded 160,000 people through the metaverse, which was staggering. It didn't replace getting together in person and doing a lot of the training. We have clients like the police. We've been actually looking at how we can create hyper-real experiences to train police staff for unconscious bias when they're doing stop and search, because we can actually create scenarios that are so realistic that we can go use role play and storytelling to actually help them learn how to serve better the public. So it really goes from public sector all the way across. I think right now we're seeing a lot of resource companies, particularly looking at sustainability and how can we, bring in machine learning AI and create simulations for them to look at how they're more ecological in what they're doing. A lot around the future of retail, though. I think it's culminating with the high street that has been in depression. A lot of brands moving to digital. Everybody's moved to digital. Now reinventing, maybe the use of digital twins in a different way for e-commerce.
Mimi, do you see the, is the plumbing of the tech world? How healthy is the infrastructure, and how far are we to be able to distribute all these kind of super immersive experiences?
It's a great question. So yeah, we typically describe Hadean as the plumbing of the metaverse. So the boring bit behind the scenes that just needs to work. I think if you think about the sort of immersive worlds that we have today, we're beginning to extend into AR. VR hasn't really got there because the hardware at the end client just isn't really ready for it. We talk about digital twins and the idea that you'll be able to pull information from any point in a factory. Well, we've got sort of 5G infrastructure only just rolling out. So I think it will happen. We will see a convergence of technologies. I agree with the same 10 to 15 year time horizon. So if you think 15 years ago, how many people had a website? Yeah. This is effectively the next generation of that.
So Faisal, you were talking about augmenting the real world, right? Augmenting the real world.
Yeah.
And with a specific focus on democratizing tools and services for the creators economy. Could you elaborate a little bit of how do you see this creators economy? Earlier we were talking about play to earn, which is a completely new model that for us it sounds like, how is that possible, play to earn? So yeah, the creators economy, what is it about, and how do you see the metaverse for this generation?
I think fundamentally, if you take what Mimi said, which is that we're 15 years away from something that is recognizable as the metaverse, and where we are today is transitioning from Web 2 to Web 3. If you think about what allowed Web 2 to become as pervasive as it is today, it was the ability for people to create websites. We could all very easily go and create websites.
Exactly.
And the tools for doing that were things like Dreamweaver and WordPress that allowed anybody who could use a word processor to create a website. If you think about what's coming next with 5G, with AR, with XR, with AR glasses, the next form of website is going to be 3D, immersive. Instead of us sitting here, we might have somebody sat on the end there as a hologram in 3D. But there is not yet a content creation platform like WordPress for a 3D internet. That's what we're trying to build at Blippar, something that's so easy as WordPress, that anybody can build their AR content.
And Richard, what do you think are the challenges behind all this? So we have if we get the right tech infrastructure, so many creators, developers, entrepreneurs creating experiences, brands pushing for them to be created. Yeah. What do you think is the biggest challenge?
Look, I mean, I've been listening today and it's been fascinating listening to the range, and I don't want to start to becoming technology's our friend or frenemy, because there's a lot of doubting of it. I think there is, look, Web 2, I think there was no real ground rules put down for a lot of people. I think ethically, I think in terms of diversity, I think we have a moral obligation to look at what we're creating now as creatives and with the partners like yourselves to make sure that everyone's represented. And I think I don't want to end on a negative. I think I always say just because we could doesn't mean we should, but why shouldn't we consider what we want to do? So dream big, and I think this puts the power in a lot of people's hands. 3D modeling was something you had to be specialized to do. The phone comes along, anybody can do it. You can work with it, you can create things. But I think that backbone, that kind of ethics around it needs to be considered. And it's an aspect of all aspects of design or any technology that needs to be considered.
Would you agree?
100%. If you think about where we are today, we are largely the product. So our data, our privacy is the product that is the way that Web 2 is monetized. If you think about what's coming next, which is where the internet is always on, and the context that you're in is feeding your AR, VR, Metaverse experience, the amount of data that's going to be available is going to increase exponentially, and for all the reasons that we heard before from our colleague at Santander. There's going to be a lot of privacy questions that we need to answer. There are some big companies that want to own all of that data and privacy in Web 3 and in the Metaverse, like they have done in Web 2.
And of course, Mimi is, creating amazing immersive experiences. We all are part of that, protagonists of those experiences. We could be doing them in a way that people are hooked to them. So they will spend more time together with data. Time spent on those platforms, services, and experiences is what it counts, right? What do you think is the biggest, the other challenge? Is there another challenge that we should be aware of?
Absolutely. I think, as I said earlier, I think there is an idea that we're all creating these experiences to lock people in and keep them time on site and sell them lots of stuff. I think that's one type of metaverse, but the idea that you can create something that you can learn from, that you can make better decisions in the physical world, that I think will be the ideal state that we end up in. But in order for that to work, data ownership is a huge challenge. This is something that the promise of Web3 is making more tangible than it's ever been. So right now we do have ivory towers that control everything that you give them, and you authenticate yourself via them to prove you are who you say you are. In a Web3 world where you can have your own blockchain identity, you can control it and you can choose who accesses your data. But the other side of that coin is I need to be able to authenticate you and know you are who you say you are, know that I'm talking to a human, not talking to a bot. So I think we've got different ways of doing that today. Blockchains can be quite hard to read and write. So speeding that up with technology services like our kind of enabling platforms are one of the ways of addressing this problem as we move into this new future.
And is it not worrying, the escapism, we are going to be able to create these amazing worlds wherever, you can be whoever you want to be, anytime, and isn't just that, there is something magic and good about it, but don't you think there is something dark also in it? Because if we leave this world to be spending all this time somewhere else, Mark?
We're going to wrap. You get like 15 seconds each to answer his question, which I think was, is it going to make us less human?
No, I think it's going to make us more human in a sense. If you're able to create new kinds of interactions with humans that weren't possible before, that's a new, exciting cultural reality to enter. It's our responsibility to not try and lock people in, and that's, as you say, is a choice of the designers.
Yep.
I'm a believer in technology, so for me, the technologies that we're creating will give opportunities to that little girl in Vietnam who can't go to ESA, but all of a sudden she can be in Barcelona with all the great professors, with colleagues from all over the world, which that little girl, her parents never thought that was possible.
Yeah, look, I have 4 children. We've talked about this, right? And I heard someone earlier say, you look through a different lens when you're a parent. It's all about time. The one commodity that we all have the same is time, right? And making use of that time with the experiences we create, the technology we do, has to be useful. But I do think it gives a huge opportunity to people like that, people that perhaps were disabled that couldn't be represented in the real world the same way, to be on a more level playing field. And I think that, for me, excites me in those instances alone. But we have to be precious with the time we take off people in any experience we create.
That's a perfect moment for me to come in and be precious with that time. Right, so listen, what a fantastic panel. We've got two more very interesting speakers, but if you three stick around, if you've got questions brewing, that's what our networking session at the end is for, because there's many more things to be asked and use cases to be had. So shall we thank everyone, Alfredo, as well. Thank you, everyone.